Hello and welcome to Cal's Corner. I'm your host, Cal Van Singel. A few quick things about me is that I love my family. I love my wife, Elisa, for over 35 years, my 2 daughters, and my 3 granddaughters. I'm a retired farmer. I've been a sports broadcaster in the greater Muskegon area for 29 years. I'm the founder of Grant Men's Ministries and co-founder of White Lake Ministries. I am a fisherman for fish and for men. You can often find me in a corner booth talking with men about life and faith. Cal's Corner is my way of inviting you to hear the incredible stories that I've been blessed to hear for 17 years. You can find Cal's Corner on YouTube. Enjoy and God bless. Hello again and welcome to episode 2 of Cal's Corner. In our podcast today, we welcome the one and only Steve Kelly from Wood Radio, morning show host over there, 106.9 here. And I'll tell you what, Steve, I have heard your message here different times as you go around the area and share your testimony, share your story. And I've heard it a few times. Maybe I might be like one of your groupies now because I seem to travel to listen to you. And I've heard it a few times, and I thought, if I start this podcast, and I was thankful to do that because Billy Mann here with KLLB Media, it fell right into place, and the place to host it, Bill's Lakeshore Golden Cards and Collectibles, those two guys have come along and made this all possible. But when I thought of you, and I thought, well, you have to be one of the first ones to come in because you have such a powerful story. And I'm gonna let you get to your story, but you do a little bit different. You read your story, kind of from birth to later on in life. So it's unique in how you do that. You do it very well.
Thank you.
So I tell you what, we're just going to turn it over to you and have at it.
Thank you, Cal. It's an honor to be here. It was a foggy, rainy evening, March 9th, 1979, not far outside of Upper Hayford Air Force Base in England. My friend John Gerard and I hitched a ride for a sleepover. He was 13, I was 14. John was very popular and extrovert and a confident leader even at that age, as I was a painfully shy introvert and follower. It wasn't even a thought that John would take the front seat, putting me in the back seat. John would sit next to the adult. As our conversation wound down, we relaxed into the short drive, into our thoughts. Maybe we even nodded off. And I remember looking through the wet windshield in the limited light of dusk to a confusing sight. I don't remember being shocked or scared, just baffled to see the lights of our car fall on a wall of hay. Now, friendships for military brats can develop quickly. When you start from scratch every couple of years, there's comfort in kindred spirits, and John and I were very close, even though we knew each other for a relatively short amount of time. You see, my parents were divorced when I was very young, and my relationship with my father eventually disintegrated into a series of heartbreaking disappointments for my sister and I, as he fought his demons with alcohol abuse and depression. When my mother next found love, it was with an old classmate from Ludington, then serving in the Air Force. We blended our families and headed out. First to K.I. Sawyer Air Force Base in the Upper Peninsula. Then our step-siblings stripped off, and next we went to RAF Croughton in England, where just my sister and I made the trip. Now, that move was particularly devastating to me, as I then lost the important relationship with the man that took my troubled father's place, my grandfather, Bob. And long-distance relationships were not quite what they are now, and since my stepfather and I were on different wavelengths, I was filling in some developmental gaps by myself. At 14, I was anxious, lonely, and troubled. I don't remember how long I pondered the wall of hay, but next came an explosion of sound and violent compaction as our vehicle crashed under a semi-truck overloaded with hay bales at what was later determined to be about 55 miles an hour. The car was wedged to the door handles as our vehicle didn't use its brakes. I still remember some distinctive sounds that came immediately. Fluid dripping, but otherwise silence. Then a sound from just above me that has chilled me for almost 45 years. My friend John's last labored breath. It was deafening. As our driver then came to with moans, it became quickly obvious that the dripping liquid was gas, and the terror of waiting for it to start on fire took the place of my shock. We were trapped in the wreckage under the truck, and we began to scream. I can't describe that feeling as our panicked cries became a chorus. Eventually, the driver of the truck was able to fish his hand into the wreckage and touch my head, and it comforted me. It was almost as if it was God himself. Now, once first responders arrived, it took 2 hours to cut me out of the twisted metal, peeled back to the back of the car where I was. And most of that time, I could see the wind catch the blonde hair of my lifeless friend. Now, we didn't know much about treating PTSD, depression, or anxiety, or even survivor's guilt in those days, especially not for a kid on a small Air Force base in England. My parents did the best they could by protecting me and insisting that we just carry on. Now, the following day, I remember telling my mother that I wanted to go to church. Although in shock, God got my attention, and I had nowhere else to turn. God was to use this event as a springboard to our relationship. And as it turns out, the devil would also count on this event as a central theme, too. We went to church as a family and then rarely missed a Sunday. It was what laid the foundational base for my lifelong faith journey. A year later, after spending most of my life as a Christmas and Easter Christian, I accepted Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior. And he almost singularly sustained me in those early years, and I'm forever grateful for that little base church with its rotating ministers. Now, I never talked to the Gerard family again. John had a younger sister, Tina, and my mom and John's dad have exchanged Christmas cards ever since, a bond made in tragedy. Now, my mom keeps her Christmas cards in a basket, and every year I go through them and read them and get pangs of guilt. After one more Air Force hop for 2 years to New York's Griffiths Air Force Base, the colonel retired and we headed home to Ludington, where I attended my last year of high school and graduated as an Oriole. I'd become a big fan of radio by then, and I remember listening in my room in England, where we spent a lot of time after the accident, to stations all over the world via shortwave, stations in Europe, whatever I could get. And although I loved the music, I had a deep appreciation for the mostly guys I heard on those shows. Some Christian broadcasters like Dr. Chuck Swindoll gave me hours of comfort. Now, years later, I wondered subconsciously if I thought I would become more comfortable with myself if I became one of those confident voices. Well, I eventually did, but I was wrong about the premise. I answered an ad in the Ludington Daily News and eventually got a job at local WKLA. I hoped to just run automation systems and become an engineer or something, as I was still painfully shy. One day, a guy didn't show up for his shift, and I had to fill in on the air. After I screwed up the first break, I fell into a rhythm, and everything changed. The sense of humor I developed trying to fit in during those military moves came in handy, and as it turns out, I inherited my father's strong voice, amongst other things. I stuck with church and found youth groups and services richly rewarding, and decided to stay in Ludington for my first year of college, and went to West York Community College and stayed at WKLA, where I got to do just a little bit of everything, and I loved it. I had a savior and a job, and I transitioned to Michigan State University, gaining confidence and getting a commercial job in Lansing. After graduation, I bounced around with jobs long enough for God to introduce me to my beautiful wife, Sandy, from Saginaw. We had no idea what adventure lay ahead, but we loved God and each other, and we were off to Maine, where our firstborn, Caitlin, came along. Eventually, we wanted to get back to Michigan. Now, despite briefly reconnecting with my birth father, Eventually, he lost his battle with depression and dependence and took his own life at 52 years old. He never met my wife, never met his beautiful grandchildren. I took it personally and was very angry for a couple of decades that just as we were establishing a relationship, his weakness would break my heart again. I chose precisely the wrong way to deal with his death. I pitied him and moved along. After all, things were going great in my life. I had a beautiful wife and child. Eventually another, Madison, came along, and then WSNX in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Steve and Sabrina took off. We joined a church that we still go to today. I started running races like the Amway Riverbank Run. Our ratings went up. Clear Channel Broadcasting, now iHeart, bought our radio station. We made more money. It was just a magical decade, which included work and play family trip to the Magic Kingdom. Now, I'd always been a pretty good drinker, but nothing like my father. We celebrated with friends and family often, and although I seemed to like it more than others, I rarely had trouble. Sandy and others would later say that they saw the signs. We'd moved to Star 105.7 by then, and change was on the way. The boss called me into his office after a show one day, told me he had a new assignment for me, but that my co-host would no longer be part of the equation. Although I protested, it was to no avail. And it wasn't just that she was being let go. I was moving to a position of getting my dream job, morning show host on Wood Radio. I was to start working with Gary Allen immediately. And I don't have the words to explain just how upsetting that was to me. Survivor's guilt had reared its ugly head again, just as my good friend was being jettisoned and I was advancing. Now, hardly the same thing as someone dying, but it was the perfect storm, as my helpless feelings and guilt about my good friend losing her job were the proverbial straw that somehow broke the camel's back. I felt like I was in control of nothing, and panic attacks became common. Things were eventually made worse as our friendship deteriorated. But who could blame her of accusing me of betrayal, as I surely felt the part? I felt so unworthy and incredibly guilty, and within that first week, I doubled my drinking habits. In the midst of my decline came the coup de grace. One afternoon, my cell phone woke me from a nap, and my now 16-year-old Caitlin's number showed on the screen. She had a license and a car and would be driving with her teammates from school to swim practice. As I hit the accept button, I heard the chirp of a first responding vehicle, and my heart sunk. Mercifully, Caitlin's shaking voice came quickly, but she was hurt. I rushed to the scene to see our totaled car and at rest in a swamp after clearly rolling several times. All the other girls' parents were arriving, and although they were okay, thank God, Caitlin said she never lost consciousness, but her pupils were huge, and we were off to Helen DeVos Children's Hospital with the eventual diagnosis of a brain injury, a pretty serious concussion. During the weeks of occupational and physical therapy that followed, I became more anxious. Almost immediately, I began to medicate more in my helplessness. Caitlin was getting better, but I was getting worse. The helplessness as a father gripped me. It was precisely at this time that the patch that I put over my childhood wounds came loose. This is what a nervous breakdown looks like, a panic attack that doesn't stop. And I did everything to make it worse. I internalized and I medicated. I even snuck away to the bar while Caitlin was getting treatments. It seemed to make me feel better. And besides, I was smarter and, after all, more deserving than those poor people with drinking problems. When my wife would confront me about my drinking habits, it only encouraged me to better conceal my consumption. Week by week, year by year, it got worse. Somehow I stayed functioning. Thankfully, I didn't become abusive. By God's grace, I didn't hurt anyone driving. Eventually, I was going to 4 different liquor stores, so even those selling me booze didn't think I had a problem. I paid alternatively with cash, debit cards, and side money I'd hide as Sandy did the books, after all. My reality was getting grim, as I was now drinking whenever I wasn't at work and awake. And booze is exactly the wrong medicine for depression, anxiety, and panic attacks. I'd even steal a few gulps before church. And I don't know what you know about serving 2 masters when it comes to my Savior. It seemed as if our priest had stepped up talking about addiction too. Like many men, I hadn't been to the doctor in a while, and my health was beginning to seriously suffer. My depression was at an all-time low, and all that booze was taking a toll. Sandy finally got me to do some lab work, and my doctor was about to reveal my alcoholic low. My liver enzyme count was off the chart, and my doc suggested I lay off the booze for a couple of weeks before they did some more blood work. Not a chance. The threat of taking away my shield only made it worse. And once again, in the abyss of my despair, it was time for God to get my attention, this time with a deadly diagnosis. After a referral to a gastroenterologist, a liver biopsy was ordered, and then came God's bottom line, as told to Sandy and I in Dr. Campbell's office. Stop drinking or die. I had advanced liver disease, and truth be told, was more afraid of a world without alcohol than dying. I'd even put a few away before that morning appointment. Out of choices during Lent in 2014, on my knees at church, I admitted my powerlessness to my Savior, and my healing began. Second to my admission to Christ was coming clean with my family. Now, their response was humbling and unconditional. A friend at a bar had suggested a therapist months before, and although I had been going, I wasn't being honest with Dr. Teresa either. I started to do real work with her. I reached out to my wife's cousin, an Alcoholics Anonymous mentor, and went to my first meeting and met my tribe. My sober date is March 14, 2014. And with God's help, mental and physical health professionals, a loving family, and supportive friends, I've now been sober for just over 10 years. Now, my parents didn't get a Christmas card from the Gerards this year, but did get a letter revealing that my friend John's mother had passed. I mentioned earlier that every year I picked through my parents' Christmas cards to read theirs, to read about my long-lost friend's family, his sister Tina, Sergeant Gerard Andre, and his wife Ingrid. Every year in my guilt and unworthiness, I wished that I could apologize to them for being the boy that lived. While talking to my wife about what I should do next, she suggested I find them and reach out. It didn't take long to find Tina on Facebook. I wrote an awkward message describing who I was, said a prayer, and hit send. Then, in the quiet of our living room, I got her response. "Holy cow," she said, "you found the right Tina." And she was sitting next to her father. It had been almost 41 years, and it was as if the weight of a truck was taken off my shoulders. My name is Steve Kelly. I've survived a nervous breakdown, been diagnosed with depression and anxiety, and I'm an alcoholic. Now, those are the very problems that my father faced, but as you heard, his story doesn't have a happy ending. The difference: faith, admission, therapy, and Alcoholics Anonymous. I recently read that addiction is a disease that sometimes gets confused with character. Understanding that you have a disease removes the shame that keeps you from seeking help. If you are on a slippery slope, look at the people that God puts in your life. Look for the coincidences that point you toward help. He is reaching into your wreckage to get your attention and will use any means necessary. There is help there is hope, and it's never too late. Finally, for those who may ask why is this guy an alcoholic? Why do some guys get cancer? So many whys. Let us remember the blind man that encountered the disciples with Jesus. They asked him, why was he born blind? Was it his sins? Was it his sins of the family? Jesus answered, so that the glory of God would be made manifest in this world through his healing. Struggles are given to us with the promise of their healing inherent in them. Jesus said to bring our worries and our prayers to him and to wait expectantly. This is how God reveals himself and shows himself to us in this world. Our testimony, what I'm doing right now, is what you're invited to do through Cal's ministry. And this is how we shine his light. Thank you.
Your name is Steve Kelly.
Yes, sir.
And you are glorifying God every single time that you share your story. You are being a great disciple. And that's what he calls us to do, is to go out and be a disciple. And you do that very, very well.
Well, thank you, Cal. I've learned from the best like you. I think oftentimes in speaking of my message, looking back as a child, we fantasize about being in battle. We fantasize about being the fireman that jumps on a railing to save a child from a house that's on fire. But God has not called me to do those things. God has called me to reveal the way that his light helped me, shone through me at the most vulnerable times of my life. And when I shift that focus to think about what an honor it is to do that, it's so much more powerful for me than being a fireman. I'm a little short for a fireman. And I'm not sure I'd be real good at taking orders in the military. So there you go.
I was part of the Grand Fire Department for probably a little bit less than 20 years. And it's not about size. It's not about stature. It's about heart. As really life is. You know, you have one of the most powerful voices in West Michigan. And you're not 6'6" and 280 pounds like some of the SWAT guys with GRPD.
Sure.
But you will have probably one of the most powerful voices in West Michigan. And I always enjoy it when you go, good morning. I always enjoy that also. So it's not about this physical size. It's about your heart. And you have a heart. And you care about those that are lost. You care about others. You don't want them to go down the road that you've had to go down. But that's your story. So you get to come in and share that. It's awesome.
And there are so many. And if you are one of those people moved to tell yours, Grant Men's Ministries,
White
Lake, Base Camp. There are a ton of men's ministries now where men are finally getting together, telling their stories and talking about Jesus, and it's great to do it out loud.
Yeah, and at Grant Men's Ministries, White Lake Men's Ministries, the base camps, and they're all safe. They're all safe places where you can come in and tell your story. You're not going to be judged. And more than likely than not, maybe there's somebody sitting in the room. You think, oh, my testimony is so bad because I've done this. Well, there may be somebody there that's even done something, for lack of better words, way worse than what you did.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And it resonates. And just being in a community is so comforting.
That is correct. So I've never been immersed in baptism, but I'm going to get baptized this summer in the Muskegon River.
Oh, exciting.
And it was funny because my Tuesday night group of guys, they don't know this, so they'll figure this out here when they see the podcast, so it comes out here in about a week or so. I'm going to invite all of them because that group of guys, my Tuesday night guys, that's my family. That's part of my family. These are the guys that I do life with, do ministry with. You know, so that just kind of popped up out of nowhere, but sometimes these things do. So, that you got to have that family. You got to have that, not only your own physical family, but that spiritual family, your group of guys or girls, women that you do life with. It makes life so much easier to go through.
Sure. And as a father, if I'm to be a leader, then I need to do what I'm called to do, just to be an example as well. So an honor.
One of the questions, and I wear the legacy band, but what do you want? I know it's in here. What do you want your legacy to be?
I think not to separate things, because I ultimately would like to be known as a child of God that answered the call. But radio has been such an integral part of my life, from just pure entertainment to now something more serious. Mm-hmm. Generally, you don't think, and we have consultants and we have meetings and we try to mold some sort of idea that people will want to listen to. It's a business, after all. We want you to stick around for the commercials. So in the early days, I sort of crafted a more popular image, right? Who would want to wake up and hear about somebody's deepest, darkest secrets? And it's not that we do that all the time, but I, in recent years, have been encouraged and buoyed by the fact that I can tell more about my personal stories and be who I really am. I'm an alcoholic in recovery, and I can't tell you, Cal, I have never connected with an audience more that I am more my genuine and authentic self. And that is just, what a gift. So richly rewarding, too. You know, you want people to come up and say, hey, I heard that thing, it was really funny. Or I heard that thing, it was very informative. But to be able to connect with someone on a more elemental basis, I'm trouble, can you help me? Will you go to an AA meeting with me? That's something else entirely. And God has said that if we believe, we'll see miracles. And what an honor to be able to see that.
Yeah. Yeah, when I look back, and I meet with a lot of different guys and hang out with a group of guys, and it's funny because everybody seems to have some type of an addiction. There's very few of my buddies who don't. You know, and there's a whole list of addictions that you can be, you know, that you can struggle with. And I've just never, it's always amazed me how many guys struggle with something. And the bulk of my friends always turn to Jesus. You know, I need help. I'm struggling with this. So they'll you know, on Tuesday night, they'll confess, say, I'm struggling with this, or I've been praying about this. And it's just out there. So if you think you're alone, you're not. And, you know, more often than not, like you said, you thought you were kind of fooling everybody, but you weren't, because everybody's seen it. You know, so, yeah. So enough of me, more about you. Yeah, I was talking to my brother on the way here about the podcast and things to do different. And I said, I'm tired of talking about me. I want to talk about you. You know, what's going on in your life. So when you came back to Ludington as a senior at Ludington, was your grandfather still alive?
Let me think about that for a minute. No. He was, yes, my grandfather was still alive when I came back, and then passed away not long after that. And then just my grandmother was there.
Okay.
But what a wonderful reunion that was.
Yeah.
Grandpa Bob, the guy that I resonated with most, drove a crane at Dow Chemical and could not have been more unlike me. He didn't talk much. He was handy. He could do anything from build a house, fix a house, paint a house, to make doll furniture and doll houses for his daughters.
Okay.
And we would spend a lot of time together not talking, and it was okay. You know, those people in your life. We would fish, and it was just magical to be together and know that you were loved. And he was a shining example of a man that provided, that was comfortable with himself, that wasn't flashy, that didn't need attention, would rather not have attention. And I treasure any time that I spent with him. Got you.
Where do you go to church at now? About your church family.
We worship at Immaculate Heart of Mary. I started off as a Protestant. I married a Catholic. And I was no way I was going to become a Catholic. I was holding on. And one series of events, God led me to the fold. And I became a Catholic. happily and willingly, and we worship now that way. And one of the things that led me into the church was they had asked, into the Catholic Church, I should say, they had asked, what would you like to do to volunteer? And there were so many ministries that were involved, and one was, they call them lectors in the Catholic Church, people that read on the altar. And I can do that. And Sister Anita was still with the church at that time. And she said, well, why aren't you Catholic? I said, I'm not really sure. I don't know. I think because I disagree with so many things. And I met with their religious ed director, who's since moved on. And for a series of weeks, we sat and talked. And I think a lot of brothers in our ministry, where we tell our stories with you at White Lake and Grant and with Base Camp, find that when we strip away all those preconceived notions about the differences between interfaith denominations, that when you look at the message, it's pretty basic. Mm-hmm. And that's how I was led. And now every once in a while I get to read on the altar, and there you go.
Do you ever feel like when you're walking up there to do that, you get that spine tingling feeling that you are literally standing in the presence of the Holy Spirit?
Absolutely. I stand behind a microphone at work every day and talk to thousands of people and never think about it for a second. But when I step on that altar and I'm representing God's word, it gets you. I get nervous.
Yeah.
And it's an honor once again. And it's good that I'm loud. The older folks appreciate that.
Okay.
And it's fun to be a part of the whole thing. I think people that sing feel the same way. Mm-hmm. It's something that I can do, and I'm just so blessed to be able to share.
I've spent nearly 30 years broadcasting high school sports here in the greater Muskegon area, and now also professional and indoor soccer. It's so much easier to broadcast than it was for me to stand in front of a group of men and tell my story.
Yep.
I mean, do you relate to that also?
I think there's something about the vulnerability.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
It's easier for you and I to just chat like we're doing now than to, share my story earlier. I think so. Absolutely.
Yeah. You're going to open up your chest and expose everything.
Yeah.
And you want to do this. I don't want you to look inside.
And like I said before, you fashion something that you hope people will want to listen to. And you don't necessarily think about yourself, right? Mm-hmm. You think about this persona that's out there that, along with in those days the music, and if the two could go hand in hand and take listener phone calls, then I'm safe, right? Yeah. I'm this thing. I'm not this guy. Yeah. But as it turns out, being this guy is something that resonates. It's so much more fulfilling for me, and it's so much easier to be used for a greater good.
Tell us more, if you don't mind, about your wife and your two daughters, what you're confident or comfortable talking about them.
I have a wife of 30-some-odd years. I should probably know specifically. Sandy, she just retired as a special ed teacher. My oldest, Caitlin, is also a daughter that teaches, an educator that teaches special education. Mm-hmm. And she'll be 29. My youngest will be 26. And she's in digital marketing. So she followed a little closer to her dad's path while her mother fell in line. My oldest fell in line with her mother. Mm-hmm.
Question, what's your morning routine look like? Because I know what it is, and it's crazy. I'm telling you right now, what this guy does in the morning is wow.
I think you just get kind of used to being tired. The alarm goes off at 3:30, and I get right up, and I'm at work by 4. And the hour before we're on the air, I think, is as productive as I can be, as there are less distractions. And then from 5 to 9, we're on the air. And the show is, there's a lot going on. There's a news wheel.
Yeah.
There's Bakita, who's the sports director. There's Lauren, that's a co-host on the show. There's Kevin Richards, who does traffic. There's Storm Team 8. It's always one of their meteorologists. Tony Allen is in the newsroom. It's just, and to have to be the one that stands in front of all the equipment and somehow brings them all into it. The thing goes so fast, you know. Mm-hmm. So that's why I think another reason why I like that hour beforehand, where I just kind of sit and get a lot of stuff done, but resonate and plan out in my head what's going to happen. And then there are all the guests that we have on the show.
Yeah, lots.
That we mix in there too.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge. It's fun, though.
Yep, and you have an engineer like we have Billy.
Well, we have two of them, but they don't help me unless something breaks.
Okay.
So there you go.
There we go.
Unfortunately, there's no Billy. I wish I could pay you because I'd hire you tomorrow.
Yeah, there we go. Best compliment you've ever received?
We did a live broadcast one time in Grand Haven, and it wasn't really open to the public, but a woman came and knocked on the window and asked for me. And she said, "Is it okay if I come in and watch? I listen to you guys every morning." And I said, "Well, sure, I guess. Why not?" And she said, "I don't have a lot of friends and no family in town." And she said, "Listening to you guys every morning feels like family to me." And I thought, well, that's about the nicest thing anybody ever said.
Absolutely. What's your favorite pastime and why?
Oh, boy. I should be better at this because I kind of work a lot. And although my shirt isn't wringing wet with toil at the end of the day, there's a lot of hours to it. Mm-hmm. I love to play golf. I didn't play a single round last year.
Oh, no.
Yeah, stuff got busy, and I think I need more pastimes. One of my other passions has been serving on the board at Mel Trotter Ministries, and I love any chance that I can get to be a part of that too. So I think that's the other thing, that I'm now vice president of the board, a true honor, and with that comes some responsibility. But again, God said we would see miracles, and we do there too.
Awesome. If money wasn't a factor, what would you do with your time?
I think we would travel more. Okay. Sandy and I are going to Italy in the fall, and when we stop to think about it, in our 30-plus years of marriage, we really go a lot of places. Mm-hmm. You know, we had 2 kids in sports. Caitlin was a swimmer. Maddie played volleyball. And we were those people. We didn't go on cruises. Our family vacations were up north, you know, or to water parks, that sort of thing.
Yep.
And now that the kids are older and way out of the house, I think we'll do more of that. And it would be helpful if I won the big $1 billion Mega Millions or whatever's out there.
You didn't win it.
No.
No. Maybe the next one. Remember your buddy.
That's right.
Yeah, there we go. Remember your buddy. What's your favorite movie?
Oh, so at Michigan State, I almost got a film minor, because I like movies so much. And you would have to break it down into type of movie and genre. I will watch Field of Dreams 1,000 times. I like Good Will Hunting because of we see ourselves in these movies, right? Field of Dreams because of the incomplete relationship that I had with my birth father.
Yeah.
The Colonel, I loved him. We became such close friends later in life. We were on such different pages, especially when I was a teenager. I think that's true for a lot of guys. That it would have been fun to go back in time and to meet my dad, because I think he was a good guy. Mm-hmm. He just didn't have the faith, and he didn't reach out to the resources, and I don't think they were there. There weren't a therapist on every corner like there is now.
Yeah.
AA was new, and there was a stigma about alcoholism and addiction. It's a disease, and we need to treat it just like we do cancer, and not because somebody has a poor will. I tried to quit 1 million times until I got the help. I couldn't do it. So we could spend the rest of the day talking about movies. I love movies.
Okay. One of the reasons I admire you, you've been, 10 plus years now without taking a drink. It would be difficult for me to go 10 plus years. It would be difficult for me to go a week without chocolate. So when I run into guys who have addictions, now I get it, because my addiction is different.
Yeah.
I have more of the food addiction.
Yeah.
Where I eat the wrong things and I eat too much. That's my struggle. So mine is different than you, but I still have that same struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like chocolate now, too. I'm the only guy that I know that quit drinking and gained weight.
Yeah.
Usually, I realized that food is delicious and that dinner is not just the wine course.
Gotcha.
We're
Yeah.
not just
What's your biggest pet peeve?
entitlement.
Okay.
I like people that want to work to get there.
Yeah. Biggest passion. What are you passionate about?
I am passionate about serving God,
Okay.
and I am passionate about advocating for those in the mental health and addiction community. I feel so for those, and part of AA is meditating. They say higher power. My higher power is Jesus. Is meditating and praying for those that haven't got the message. I was such a completely different person when I was lost in my powerlessness, and I feel so for them. Same with mental health. The work that I did with Dr. Teresa was instrumental to the more confident person that you see now, and I feel for those that don't have the resources to make that happen.
Yeah. When you started to speak earlier in your talk, you talked about being an introvert. You are far removed from that. If you look at where you are now to where you were as a child of 13 or 14.
And for that, I credit radio.
Yeah.
Because I got to build that confidence by being that person and then going out as that person. You know what I mean? So I get a little more nervous being the regular guy, but when I can be the representation of the guy that you hear on the radio, there's kind of a shield there. So it's kind of a false confidence in a certain extent, but I'm 59 years old now and a little more comfortable in my skin. And again, especially now that I'm sober and have had the work of therapy. Absolutely.
You ever get recognized for your voice? 'Cause
Yeah.
you have the voice. You have a voice.
I do. It's not very often. It's not as much as I thought I would when I first got in the radio. I thought, holy cow, this is going to be something. And as it turns out, that's not really a thing. It's my only marketable skill. I've never had to work. I've just done radio. And we have a man shack up north where some people deer hunt. And all walks of life in my family and friends, guys with names on their shirts and steel-toed boots. And
Yeah.
I can't do what they do.
Yeah.
I got a cousin that is in industrial maintenance, and the specifications to clean stuff at that level blow my mind.
Yeah.
I just happen to be able to talk on the radio, and that's not any different than anything else.
A lot of those guys are the men that built America.
That's right.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump back into your world.
Okay.
What was the last thing you searched for on Spotify? We probably use iHeartRadio more often. Okay.
Just a free plug
Yeah.
right in there. But in the morning, the music that transitions from one thing to another is the music that I search for the most.
Okay.
Right? So if I'm going from an interview toward commercials to get to the bottom of the hour, I want music. And this morning, I went on Google to find songs related to sun, because when you watch this, today was the day that there was the eclipse. So I was searching for music that had sun in it. Beatles, Here Comes the Sun, Black Hole Sun, a lot of sun stuff.
Yeah.
So it's usually theme specific, because I don't listen to as much music as I would like to.
Okay. Gotcha. Outside of your grandfather in your earlier age, who's the most influential person in your life?
Well, I should say Jesus Christ, right?
Yeah, okay.
Because
okay.
I read and study and pray and hope. But the Colonel was very instrumental with me as well, my stepfather. We were sort of leery of each other at first, but he was a guy with a true servant's heart and had Jesus in his heart as well. And he was involved in every organization that he could, from the Legion to the VFW. And he was always running out the house on the Saturday morning for a pancake breakfast or whatever. And he had a flagpole at his house. And he had reverence for that flag like he did any other flag, and would raise it and light it, and there were specifications about it, and I have great respect for my country as well, and I think I learned a lot from the colonel, especially the way that he took care of my mother, and still is, in a certain sense, now that he's gone.
What's your biggest fear right now?
I got anxiety, and I am afraid of everything sometimes.
Sorry to ask that.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know that I can name one thing.
Okay.
And I think anxiety is helpful for performers, if you can call what I do, what you've done too, as performing, because we're kind of afraid all the time anyway, so what the heck if there's an audience, I'm nervous anyway.
It's the most important lesson you've learned in life.
It's not about me.
Yeah.
And the more you give, the more you get back, especially if that's not the reason why you do it.
I tell buddies that you cannot outgive God.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't do it. And I don't mean financially, but if you just work for Him, and you are relentless in your pursuit of Jesus, you can't outgive Him.
Right.
I was just 65 years. I've learned that. It took a long time, but I've learned that. You just can't outgive Him.
And the one cure for my anxiety is being in God's grace, doing one of those scary things, right? I read Jesus Calling every day, a devotional, and one the other day, paraphrase, said, if you don't do scary things for God, you won't get to reap the really cool things that get done. So, yeah.
A couple more here. What is a unique thing about you that we don't know about? Something that unique.
I live my life in public. That I don't talk a lot the rest of the day. It's, they say guys have a certain number of words and women have more. And I'm not arguing with that. But I am a super quiet, generally shy guy when I'm not on the air. And Sandy will tell people if we're at a party or whatever that he used all his words up on the radio. I don't like parties, and not just because I don't drink anymore, but I'd rather do something kind of one-on-one or couple-on-couple. I take a little walks sometimes. The girls call it ghosting. If I'm at a big function and I feel a little weird, sometimes I'll just peace out.
I like that.
Yeah.
Final question. What's the one question that I did not ask you that you wish I would have? Is there something that you want to end with, or you want to talk about?
I think you got it all in there, brother. Thank you for not asking me how tall I really was. How about if that questions I'm glad you didn't ask me, I'll sneak those in there as well. It's an honor. Your friendship is a blessing to me. And we've known each other for, again, a relatively short amount of time. 5 years, maybe 4 years?
Yeah, if that. Yeah, not real long, correct.
And you're just such a... Cal texts me in the morning, and I've got a couple of close friends that everybody's afraid to do it because they think I'm busy or whatever. But I'll get a text from Cal that he heard something, and it just means the world to me. And I wish more men would have better, if this is going to sound like a Better Homes and Gardens or a women's therapy session, and I wish more guys would do nice things to other guys like you do.
Oh, so thank you.
I'm honored by your friendship, and I'm glad you asked me to come here today.
Well, I'm honored by yours, and you were one of the first ones I thought of. I thought, because when you go into a venture like this, and it fell in my lap, Billy was a great engineer. We have this Bill's Golden Cards and Collectibles. We have the card shop right here in Whitehall. And, when you sometimes you think about doing things. And it's like, oh, I can't do this. It's like Grantman's Ministries. I mean, once he hit me upside the head with a 2x4, because that's what you have to do with me. I'm just an old farmer.
Right.
Bam. I'm not either going to run over you with a tractor or I'm going to hit you. And then once that started, and now it's going to be 17 years this May. Wow. And then Grantman's Ministry, or White Lake Men's Ministries, and the other 3 ministries that have been birthed off of that. What happens if what would have happened if I would have said, no, I'm not going to do it?
I see lightning.
Imagine that.
Nope, I see lightning. But I think you made the right choice.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've been called to do this. That's just God. What's the old saying? God does not call the equipped; He equips the called.
Yep.
And I think He does that in all of us.
Don't say no to God because of fear, because God will alleviate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, once again, everybody, thank you for joining in the Cal's Corner, episode 2. Thank you, Steve Kelly, for being here, being so awesome, being so vulnerable.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, you're a blessing to me and many, many others. Billy Mann from KLLB Media and Bill's Golden Cards and Collectibles right here in Whitehall. So thank you. If you watched episode 1 with Dan Roan, if you haven't, go back and watch that, please. And thank you for tuning in and watching this episode also. So thank you. God bless, and we'll see you soon.